my background is in fundraising, but it first 15 years of my professional career were in Major League Baseball. So I played baseball professionally, and Pam and I met when I came to know the Lord when I was in the minor leagues. That's the development league for baseball. We met each other, and then she became a believer after we met. And then the next year I was in the major leagues, and then we continued to grow and go, and have some children. We have 3 grown children right now. We settled in Arizona in the U.S., where spring training takes place for the team that I was with. So we stayed there. And Arizona's a nice weather, but it's the desert. So has anybody been to Arizona? You guys been to Arizona? Grand Canyon? Yes. Yeah. So we have lived there now for, 30 years. When my baseball career concluded, I began raising money from people for investments. So for maybe real estate, for restaurants, for technology companies. I went to work for a nonprofit organization called Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a legal organization. And I was a major gift officer, meaning developing major gifts. And then after about a year and a half of doing that, I became the team leader, the head of the development team, the field development team. And then after that, I became the head of development at that organization. So responsible for major gifts, the ambassador program, volunteers, foundations, planned giving, events, and loved that responsibility. And then after 10 years there, I went into the movie business, faith films, Christian movies, to raise money. You have to have money to make a movie. So I did that for some years, and then I started a production company over the last 3 or 4 years. I've been making movies and TV shows for Christian with faith, God in the story. So now I get to talk with you about fundraising. So as we go along, you can certainly raise your hand and ask questions, and there is some time at the end to talk more. This is Pam in the middle, and those are 3 children that are adults now. And I like to ski. I like heli skiing. So there's a trip in August to Chile, down in South America. So first of all, fundraising is a part of ministry. It is not a necessary evil in growing your organization. It is a part of ministry. And it turns out that I really enjoy fundraising because the Lord has equipped me to do that. But I see it as ministry, and I understand that if you're going to resource your organization, then you're going to be asking people to join in with you. So this leader at the top here is a guy named John Maxwell. Anybody familiar with John Maxwell? Yeah, probably read many of his books. He says, vision is a clear picture of tomorrow that asks for a commitment today. You'll always pay for the vision before it's a reality. Paint the picture clearly and be so engaging that people buy into it. This summarizes fundraising. And Henry Blackaby, who wrote the Bible study materials and discipleship materials called Experiencing God, he said famously, watch to see where God is working and join him in his work. So this is the sort of theory that you're going to be taking to people if you want them to join in with what you're doing. You really are going to be communicating vision. Vision, vision, vision. Lead with vision. So I see asking people to participate by donations or their time, or even asking people to consider coming to work on a project as a tangible way to advance the kingdom. So that is the starting point for our work as fundraisers. These are some scripture verses to just help reinforce why we do what we do. And we start with praying. We start everything we do with praying and asking to be aligned with the Lord, not necessarily asking the Lord to align with us. So fundraising started early on in Scripture. Speak to the people of Israel. God told Moses that they take for me a contribution from every man whose heart moves him. You shall receive from them gold, silver, and bronze. This is, again, a ministry. But there's other biblical examples of fundraising. King David, for the temple, and then he passed the baton to Solomon, but started the campaign. Nehemiah wanted to see the walls of Jerusalem rebuilt. He had to have a clear vision. He had to approach King Artaxerxes to ask him if he would allow him to go do it. He got permission. And then they started building the wall, and they needed lots of resources. And they had, in one hand, a tool for building the wall, and in the other hand, they had weapons for when they were going to be attacked. So we should prepare for spiritual warfare if you're going to be a fundraiser and you want to do something impactful. Don't be surprised if there's some opposition. Hezekiah, Paul, many people in the Bible had been part of campaigns and fundraising. So these are the 7 essentials. I think that this presentation will be available to you in your app, hopefully, but if not, there'll be a way to get it in resources in the future. A compelling mission and vision is the beginning that we'll start talking about. A donor-centric approach, effective communications, strategic planning, major gifts, events and recognition, transparency and accountability, and then a diverse revenue stream. So a compelling mission and vision is the beginning of your story that you're going to be telling as you meet with people. I think you've probably heard by now that money follows ministry. And I've said many times in my network, nothing motivates like results. So as soon as you start doing results that are clearly the Lord is at work, that will motivate and encourage people to want to join in. We need to develop what is your North Star? What is it that guides your mission? Can you communicate your mission? I read a book called Lead Like Jesus by a man named Ken Blanchard. And he said in there in one of the chapters, everybody in your organization should be able to recite the mission and the vision. These are your values of what you're doing, the mission and vision. And not only that, but working there for the fulfillment of the mission and the vision of the organization. Okay, so if we really don't know our mission and vision, they're not easy to remember. It's 3 sentences. It's going to be challenging for all your people to remember it. So, for instance, at the organization that I worked at, a legal organization, it was keeping the door open for the spread of the gospel. Keeping the door open for the spread of the gospel. And we did that through legal channels. But at least I could remember that. And was that important to me? Yes, it was important. But keep that in mind as you're thinking through these things. All right, so donor-centric approach is number 2. And what that means is that we are asking people to join in on what we're doing. And when we talk with someone about giving, we must recognize that the ask is for the cause. People give to people. People will give to you, but they'll give to you because you have a cause, not just because you're saying, hey, can you give me some money? So people love to give to other people if they like you, and if they're believers usually, but if they like you, if you have a cause that they agree with. It's true that people give to people with a cause. Build strong relationships. This is why it's a little bit, there's misunderstanding about fundraising, that you can just bring somebody in to fundraise and then it's going to happen immediately. It takes time, oftentimes years, to build trusting relationships where they can see and follow and build confidence with your organization. So you would like to get people started, and then you can develop them along the way. Understand what they care about. What do the donors care about? What do they align with? And once you understand what they care about, you can talk about what you care about. So raising money is really research and development. It's understanding who these people are, what motivates them, and then you can start to align your project with what they care about. But if you find out that somebody cares about, immigration, that's their most important topic, and you happen to have an elementary school that you're raising money for, you're going to want to know that information about them so that you can say, hey, I see that you have a passion for immigration. We do have a elementary school that we're starting to raise money and grow and expand. And actually, we're thinking about having a little more diversity of students, and we have a program for immigrant students. Now you're probably talking their language, but you don't want to create extra programs that cause problems, but you at least are aligning with what they care about. Effective communication is critical in fundraising. Effective communication is critical. Does anybody know who this person is here? Yeah. Simon Sinek. So he's an especially effective communicator, and I would encourage all of you to jot down the video, the golden circle, why you do what you do. So you can watch the YouTube video. It's only maybe 3 minutes long. But the YouTube video is where he articulates that it's most important that you're able to tell people why you do what you do, not just what you do. What you do is important. Here's what we do. We do these things. We serve meals. And how you do it is also important. Well, here's how we do it. We bring in the trucks, and then they unload, and the volunteers all line up, and here's how we deliver 5,000 meals. But why you do it is going to be motivating and emotional, and that's what we need to communicate effectively. Okay, just keep in mind why you do what you do is much more important than what you do, even though that's very important. Jesus was an effective communicator. That's the only reason I put this slide up here. What do we see about this picture? Why would you think that would be effective communication? Eye level, looking at each other. Physical contact, so this is what you don't want to do with your donors. You can't run away, hold tight. What kind of emotions are in this image? Compassion, caring, empathy. Meeting needs. Really good. So these are the things that are all part of your fundraising approach. This is the emotion that you'll have when you're fundraising, because your passion and enthusiasm is going to be contagious for other people. Now, the methods of communication are plethora. We have no shortage of ways to communicate with people in the modern society. And it's important to recognize what these are, but what we also need to do is acknowledge that some of us feel more comfortable in some of these things than others, but they're not all the most effective way to communicate your fundraiser. So especially the generation behind me, the younger generation, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, they like to email and text, but personal interaction's more uncomfortable. So they would be happy to send an email saying, hey, we got a little fundraiser going. Can you send me some money? And that might get $50 or something if there's a relationship there. But to be serious about fundraising, you're going to want to find the most effective way to communicate with somebody about the emotional side of your fundraising and why it matters. So personal visits is at the top of the list. And then all these other things are components that you'll want to use during a fundraising campaign or initiative. And I wouldn't just lean on only one of them, but it depends on your particular organization and what you're trying to accomplish. The best practices for your effective communication is figure out which is most appropriate way to communicate with your constituency. What's the most appropriate way, most effective way? Know who they are, and this goes back to research and development. You want to know who you're meeting with. You can't assume anything. If I was going to try to raise money from you all, I would really like to know what you care about before I started just telling you about my cause. It's good to be bright and quick and concise in your communications. I don't know about you guys, but when I receive an email that's 3 paragraphs long, I'm like, oh, I'm too tired to read this. It's too much. But they want to tell me everything. But what would be better if they said, hey, I have something really important I'd like to talk to you about. Can I meet you for coffee next Thursday? I can just say, yes, we can meet for coffee next. Yes. When we're communicating, whether it's in social media, text, email, posters, videos, make sure you're checking your grammar because it's all a reflection of what you're trying to accomplish. So try not to take shortcuts because they're not going to tell you that they were turned off because you misspelled a word, but subconsciously they're going, I don't know if they're going to be able to steward my money that well. And I like, besides being polite, I would say this, be pleasant and persistent. And we'll talk further about the donor process of raising money, but be pleasant and persistent. Persistent just means tenacious. Persistent means you don't give up too easy. You're not disturbing, you're not being a nuisance, but you want to be consistent with your communication. And many times people aren't saying, bless you, honey. Many times people are not saying no to you. They're not saying yes or no. They're just sort of taking in information. And so you just want to keep saying, here's another little update on what we're trying to accomplish. And then at some point you have to find out if they're ready to go or not. And we'll talk more about asking people to join in with what we're doing more specifically in a minute. Does anybody know who this person is? Yep, that's Jeff Bezos. So Amazon. So who would have guessed that he would have built this empire from a book distributor, warehouse? I don't think he would even say that he had this in his mind. He might, but I would be surprised because they grew doing something really well, and then it kept expanding from there. But I really salute the fact that he had the capacity to keep growing and getting into several different categories: web hosting, database housing, data housing, obviously grocery distribution, Hollywood movies, all sorts of different things. It's an amazing thing, but all of that takes pretty specific planning before they launch their next category. He doesn't need a fundraiser now, I don't think. So when it comes to strategic plans, you're going to need to line up your team. So fundraising starts with a blueprint, and then there's lots of evaluation that comes along the way. Putting together the resources for your plan at the beginning means you're going to get together with, if it's just you, then you should probably sit quietly and think through, what is your plan? What is your strategy? What do you know? What have you learned? You might go home with 3 things that you learned from this thing. You think about those 3 things and go, okay, I would like to grab people and try to pull some people into a brainstorming session before I decide that I'm going to fundraise for something. And this is separate from capital campaign. That's just to say you need to think strategically. These people are also happy. I wonder what they're looking at. This was a AI generated image. I prompted it with a couple things about strategy. But I oftentimes will say, what's the goal? So if you think you're going to be fundraising, I would start with, what's the goal? And make sure you're all in sync with what's the goal. What's the time frame? What is the average size gift you think you're going to get? The medium size gift? How are you going to go about communicating these things? How many total donors do you think that you have in your area? Do you have 5 or do you have 5,000? You're going to want to think through some of these. It's like a playbook, for your sports team. You have to come up with these things. And response rates, testing your messages, brainstorming, all of these things. All the different channels that you're going to use in communication. You got to think through these, get them down on paper. You're making a plan. The reason I really liked this image is because it reminded me of a commercial that came out some years ago for UPS, the package delivery company. And it had a small group of people. It was clearly a young company that just started selling their products. And they were all huddled in front of the computer, and the computer showed that the sales now went live, and they sold one product and they all cheered. And then the thing went to 2, 3, 4, 5, and it got up to 10, and they were cheering, and then it went to 100, and they're like, yeah! And then the thing started spinning really fast, and then they weren't happy anymore. They realized they had a bigger problem with logistics. Now they weren't going to be able to deliver their product to their customers. But this is part of planning, is you can't know everything that's going to happen, but you have to do your best job of at least thinking through what is the blueprint for your plan. So with that comes a SWOT analysis. Are you guys familiar with SWOT analysis? This is a great tool. It's easy. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it's just a time-honored system. It's a good thing to just understand the game board. You got to just understand what's happening. So there's no humility in acknowledging threats and weaknesses and opportunities and strengths. It's just understanding what the reality is right now. And then you can be more serious about forming a strategy that will work. In my past, when I was playing baseball, I was a pitcher, and a pitcher I needed to know what my strengths were. Because if I went out there and thought that my strengths were something that they weren't, I would have a hard time getting major league hitters out, because they have their own strengths and weaknesses, and we all have to know what each other has. If we don't, we will not be effective. So it's just a good practice to do. There's a guy named Bob Beal that had been to ELF many times, many years, and I've had occasion to spend a lot of time with him, and he has a couple of great tools that I've used throughout my professional career. And one of them, he talks about thinking. He talks about the 4 levels of thinking. Number 1, people, generally speaking, and this is most of the population, would say, everybody thinks like me, or they will when they grow up. And I've been a victim of, I don't even think that's the right word, but I've succumbed to the temptation to think that everybody thinks like me, or they will when they grow up, which is a bad way to go through life, because you tend to get frustrated and impatient with other people. Second level is, everybody doesn't think like me, and recognizing that. Third would be, everybody doesn't think like me, and that's a good thing. And then fourth is, I'm okay being me. And you know what? You just have some contentment, you have some peace, but you understand who you are in this dynamic, which is to say, you understand that God is who He is, and we have a right view of ourselves in light of everybody else that we're spending time with. So strategy is an important part of your fundraising, is put together some sort of a plan and then work your plan. And then if it's not working, you go, I think I need to adjust my plan. Now we get into major gifts, events, and recognition. So these people that I put pictures on here, they look like people that I would fundraise with. These are people that I would spend time with and talk about why it's important that we're together taking on this issue. But there's lots of different types of people, and if you're fundraising, you should probably enjoy and be curious about lots of different people. This is called the development process. And I learned the hard way during my own network that I put this up, and I didn't have the red arrows in there. I just threw those in there today. But I started to explain that I asked them what that shape is, and nobody responded. That is home plate. And in the U.S., baseball starts at home plate, where the batter's standing. And home plate is where the foul lines go out into the field. And then when you hit a ball, you run toward first base on the research side, and you try to score. You score a run by getting around the bases and coming in home there where the recruit side is. So the donor process starts there at the bottom right and goes around the bases. Anyways, I've found out that this doesn't translate that well over in Europe. But the 5 pieces, they do. So as I'd mentioned earlier, the first thing is to understand who you're fundraising from. Who are they? What do they care about? What's important to them? Understand that. Maybe write it down. If you're going to visit a couple that is the business owners in your community, and maybe they don't even go to your church, but you think you might be able to have them as a prospect, then you're going to want to do some research. What do they care about? What do they like? What's important to them? Those are things that you have to know. And then the romance is just to say that you're going to start to cultivate a relationship with them to say, I think you have to be relational people. And that doesn't mean 3 weeks or 3 years or 3 months or anything. It just means there has to be some rapport that you establish with them. Some sort of rapport. And then at some point you're going to ask them, would you consider joining in with what we're doing? And there's a lot of different ways to ask somebody for money. And we can talk about those if you want in Q&A. Because I really like the really practical stuff is what are good lines that work, what are icebreakers, what are things not to say. That's when you get into the real profession of fundraising. And then once somebody has given a gift to you, maybe that really wealthy business owner couple said, yeah, we'll give you some money, and they give you 100 euro. And you go, that's horrible. They were supposed to give us 1,000 or 10,000 euro. They gave us 100. That's where you be pleasant and persistent, and you say, thank you so much. That's great. And now they're in. Now you get the opportunity to report back to them on anything good that's happening in your organization. Hey, I just wanted to let you know that this happened. And it's really healthy because it gives them a lot of joy to go, oh, that's good news. We gave to something that's doing good. That's their reward because you're not transacting with them. They're going to give you 100 euro and you give them a skateboard or something. They're hoping that they get some joy out of that gift. And this is a principle that will apply everywhere across the globe. I know you all face unique challenges in your own countries, but these are just principles. But you have to navigate the landscape of how do you work through the government, NGOs, your community, your civic government systems, all those things. And then the final piece of the puzzle is maybe that couple gives a second gift, which is a great thing. If somebody gives a second gift, now they've shown they're interested. And then they might even become major donors. And then at some point you say, hey, would you guys be willing to introduce us to a couple of people because together we can do more? That's the pinnacle of your development process. Any questions on that? What sport should I have put up here on this? Go around. Football? Yeah. All right, next time I come, I'll have to do that. Now, talking specifically about major gifts, this is just a fact, and the top 10% of your donors are going to provide anywhere from 60% to maybe 95% of your total budget. If you're a really large organization, and I work for a large organization, major donors, the top 10% of our donors, so if we had 100 donors, the top 10%, 10 of them provided 60+% of our total budget. Now, we had like 23,000 donors. But the top 10% provided over 60% of the total budget. And those are built over time, those top major donors. But effective communication, consistency, relationships, those have to be cultivated and grown through the years. Events is an important part of your annual fundraising efforts, okay? Maybe even you're just kicking off your fundraiser, or you're doing a quick one. You've all been to fundraising events. Is that fair to say? Okay, every time your job now as you go forward, because you're going to want to be able to raise funds. It's a good thing to do. Everybody needs money. Money is just fuel. It's important to know what is the reason for the event. Are you doing an event because you're trying to raise money? That's a very specific type of event. And I would say a lot of people say, let's have an event and then we'll raise a bunch of money. That is not a good approach for events or for raising money. Events, in my experience, are the best way to introduce people to what you're doing. Okay? And you also get to invite the people that have already given to you so that they can be encouraged by what they hear there and go, oh, right, I forgot. This is why I love this organization, because they hadn't thought about it for 3 months. So you get to invite them to a fun event. Would you mind coming in, and I want to treat you special because you're already one of our people, but we're doing a little event to introduce some new people. They might even bring another couple that's never heard of your organization. And ultimately, you want to build a sense of consistency of your brand. Who are you? You've got a logo, right? Most everybody has a logo. Your brand building. What's your culture? What do you like? What's your mission, vision, values, all those sorts of things. So that is ultimately what events are about. If you start wanting to do events to create real fundraising, that is a different thing. And there are different types of events, small, medium, large events. There's affinity events. There's, coffee. There's dinners, big gala events. The reason that I put Letitia Fry up there is because you'll want to do events that are a little interesting or novel. They're different. Everybody has the normal event where you show up and they give you a bad plate of food, and then somebody gets up and talks, and then somebody else gets up and talks, and then an hour later, there's still more people talking, and your people are bored and they just want to go home. So what can you do to be exciting, innovative, different, to set yourself apart? So Letitia is an auctioneer, a professional auctioneer. Does everybody know what an auctioneer is? I can't do it. They talk fast, and they auction off art sometimes, or anything, and they auction it, and they tend to get the audience riled up and excited, and she's very effective. Pam and I have been to, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 different events where she has gotten up on stage, and she raises a lot of money. She is there to raise money because there might be a vacation home that somebody donated in Italy. And they'll have a picture of the vacation home, and she goes, we'll start the bidding at $5,000. And do we have $5,000? She starts auctioning, and then the people all get excited, and she's got people out in the audience that are all yelling and screaming too. And the next thing you know, somebody just bid 25,000 euro for that, vacation villa in Italy. And she raised a lot of money. I've seen that happen. And it ends up being kind of fun, and it's different because we don't ever see auctioneers. So what are some other different ways that you might have an event that is exciting and good? Now, a trap with events is you go, well, our annual budget is $10,000. And now we want to have an event, and an event's going to cost $1,000. We don't have enough money to do the event. So then you go raise money from somebody to do the event. Well, that's fine. And you go, oh, this event's not costing us anything because we're raising the money from them. Well, what you really did is you just asked them to give to your organization, and then you're now having an event as part of your strategy. That is totally fine, but don't fool yourself. That's got to be part of your blueprint for fundraising, okay? Just make sure you're clear up front. We probably are going to want to have 2 events this year, or we're raising money, X amount of dollars before the end of the calendar year. We're going to have an event in November. And how much is that event going to cost? You got to build a budget and so forth. Is everybody tracking with that? And it's good to have volunteers there, because volunteers can become what? Volunteers can become donors, investors. You can call them investors. They're investing. And events, I think of them in 3 parts. The first part is lots of planning and preparation and getting your volunteers. The second part is executing a good event. You got to do it really well, or else people won't think that highly of your organization if you go, this looks shaky. And then the third part is follow-up. You have to follow up effectively. That's actually the last part of the event. A lot of people work hard, have the event, and then they collapse. But the most important part, I would say, is the follow-up for the event. Recognition, and this is in treating your donors, you're not maybe going to start with major donors, but as the development process goes along, you might find some major donors. And then what you need to do with every donor is say thank you. Sometimes people struggle with the idea that you're treating someone really special because they have a lot of money. Well, what I'd like to do is put you at ease. You would treat everybody exactly the same if you had enough time and bandwidth capacity to do it. You don't. So you have to be strategic about who you're going to talk to. Everybody's special, but not everybody is as strategic. Okay, everybody's valuable in the eyes of the Lord, but not everybody is the same strategic value. Okay, those are different things. So it's good to thank everybody. So how you might thank somebody that gave you 5 is an electronic email that says, here is your acknowledgement. Thank you so much. We love you. You're the greatest because we couldn't do this without you. You might thank the couple that's the big business owner with a personal card and then a phone call and then later a little token of appreciation, a small gift that maybe one of the children in the ministry did something and you give it to them. The other colleague of mine in the organizational development and fundraising network, when he was speaking, he said the average amount of times you should be thanking your donors is 5. That's sort of a standard. 5 different creative ways to say thank you. So here we have Ed and Joan Hemphill, and this is just a classic donor wall. But do you think they're happy to see their name up there? Now, would you put their name up there if you never even told them? Definitely not. Some people would not like to know that their name just went up on the wall without. But if you said beforehand, we are building a new wing on our hospital, and it's going to take some big gifts, and we see you as leaders in the community, and we'd like to ask you if you'd like to participate in serving more people with healthcare. And they go, okay, we'd like that. And we want to acknowledge your participation in this because we're going to acknowledge the top, 125 donors. And we'd like you to be part of that group. And are you okay with us doing that? And they usually are. Because they're human beings, we like to feel good about ourselves. And they might be thinking, we want our kids to see that we were generous. So yeah, put it up there. I mean, they'll say, no. And you say, we really want to. You can, and then they'll be happy that they're up there on the wall. Transparency and accountability. This is an important part of being effective with your organization is be transparent and have accountability and be specific when you're raising money. Sometimes you're going to want to tell them what is this money used for. Okay, people will want to know, if I give you 100, is 35 of that going to your salary? So that's administrative costs. They're just going to want to know some of this stuff. So anyway, the Scripture, Moses spoke to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, saying, this is the thing which the Lord has commanded, saying, take from among you a contribution to the Lord for lighting and spices, for the anointing oil, and for the fragrant incense, for the ephod, and for the breastpiece. Very specific stuff, right? So you should be able to do the same. Here's what we're raising money for, these things. And then show that the money you raise will enable you to achieve the work of the Lord. Assure people that their gifts were going to be used for that work of the Lord. This is all part of reporting. And being an effective fundraiser means you're going to be communicating some of these things to people. Tracking and measuring outcomes at regular intervals provides an opportunity to assess your progress. There are, I don't know about in Europe, but in the States, there are watchdog groups that rate charities based on how effective they're doing their work. Like I'm familiar with Charity Navigator, I'm familiar with Charity Watch, Guide Star. So these will give a rating for the ministries. Like if one ministry organization has 20% administrative costs, then they will list it, and they'll maybe downgrade them because they're spending so much of their budget on just people having jobs. Whereas they would view that as not quite as effective as some other ministry. There's only 4 people working in there, and 90% of the budget goes to the administrative costs for those 4 people. Vastly different organizations and goals, though. So, but it's good to be really transparent with your donors. If you're a superstar counselor that prevents suicide, it might be 90% of the donations are going to go to make you able to be out there doing your work. Okay, but you got to be transparent with your donors about what this is for. And this is something that I'd heard from a fundraising professional, but I have also seen this to be true, as I've hired many people to fundraise over the years, that those people that are high in empathy as a character trait and have impeccable integrity tend to be the most effective fundraisers. So what this looks like to a potential donor is it's somebody that is able to be in the moment with the other person, so they care about the other person. This is why you're listening and you're asking some questions, you're being curious, but not being a nuisance and prying into their lives. You're just trying to discover what they care about. And impeccable integrity is the opposite of a car salesman. Does that translate to Europe? Car salesman? Yeah. They're really slick and they're like fast talking and they're trying to sell you something that you don't even really want. That's not a good fundraiser. You want somebody that does what they say, and they mean what they say, and there's authenticity there. And people that are watching you, when you come to ask somebody to join in what you're doing, they're watching 1,000 different things that you do. And you may not even be aware, but this is why it's good to practice also with, you don't go to Mr. and Smith's, the couple that owns the business in town. First, you might go to some other people to say, hey, I'm working out my presentation here. How's it sound to you? That's a great thing to do. Practice a little. A diverse revenue stream. I heard somebody mention that. Who was? Yeah. So this is an important part of building a sustainable and a longer-term operation. Is you want to have a diverse revenue stream. So what does that mean? It means that it's especially important when you're trying to help people find money to contribute. You have to be creative because people can make donations to your organization in a lot of different ways. And this is why you like professional fundraisers, because they tend to have focused on all these ways to do it. If your business owner couple in town, they have a business and they make staircases. And they have a warehouse and it's full of staircases that they couldn't use. They may not know that they can donate those staircases and it can go toward your organization. Now, your organization's going, what am I going to do with staircases? You sell them. There's other places that will do this. They'll sell those staircases into somewhere that they need stairs. Cars, all sorts of different things can be donated. And then, again, I don't know for sure I'm just coming at this from a U.S. perspective, but there's tax breaks that can be attributed to somebody that donates property, cash, and all that. So there may be ways that if you can be creative in your own environment, you can help people get the joy of giving and doing it in a different way than they thought that they could. Well, this is a tall task for you guys to think about, but because giving is obviously biblical, to help your people see that when they give, they're probably no closer to being like what Jesus is than when they give. And that Jesus said it's better, you're more blessed to give than receive. So you guys might need to be coaches to help people understand that they can give and it's going to be a blessing. But I don't want to presume anything. But what I also want to do is break the mold a little to let you know that there's some ways that you can go out there and you can resource your vision in ways that maybe you didn't even think was possible. And you might take, some obstacles and some of those things, but you'll pray, depend on the Lord, be tenacious, pleasantly persistent, and see if you can succeed. I wouldn't try to rush out there and do this without praying and really having a good plan, though, and testing, and some of those things. Okay, the strongest ministries will be those that have a long-term commitment to building genuine relationships with donors and a true desire to have authentic ministry in those individuals' lives. So it turns out that I have heard of many people throughout Europe that are generous. It's just that they're many fewer than what we have in the States because we have a different system. But I know that they're human beings that are made in the image of God. They will love to give once they get a little taste of it. So maybe you help them start small and then give them a lot of joy in reporting back to them, and then maybe some glorious things will happen. Why do I have Taylor Swift up here? Well, Taylor Swift has arguably the biggest following ever, maybe, except for Jesus. I mean, it's insane. But she also has a great reputation for being really personable with her fans. She's constantly communicating with her fans. And she does this, it's admirable in how she does this, because she can't be with everybody, but she's clearly taking a selfie with these two girls. What are they going to do with that picture? They're going to spread it everywhere. So this is just something to keep in mind, that if you can think big, you can start to move that way. When she does a little video where she gave a special gift or a special seat to a concert to somebody that was in need, let's say, it goes viral. And then she says, I love my fans. And then they believe her and they love her back. It's an amazing thing. But I'd say there's lessons to be learned here from this operation. There's a lot of lessons we don't want to learn, but it is an amazing thing to see how she treats her fan base and how much they love her for it. So in some concluding thoughts, fundraising is spiritual. It's not a necessary evil part of your organization. It's really a blessing to be able to do it. And I would encourage you to communicate that to your constituency. It's highly relational. Fundraising is strategic, so you don't want to just stumble into it out there. Although oftentimes the Lord will bless you in ways that you never saw coming. And it can be game-changing. And this is something that you should consider, that you might start to raise funds and resources and people, and it can be a game changer for your nation or for your organization, especially if somebody big decides to invest in you.